Welcome to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of Friday, the 7th of November, 2014. The post-election show, the pre-Veterans Day show, the Guy Fawkes +2 show, and much to report on. Let me say, first of all, the most important news of all is the tremendous advance made by the Tax Wall Street Party, the Tax Wall Street movement. And that comes in these elections. And let me go, first of all, to Nebraska. We're going to be talking to Dan Buhrdorf in Nebraska later on. But let me just point out, this was a masterful campaign, one worthy of study in the near future, starting from virtually no resources and a small group of volunteers. This got into the official cattleman's debate, along with the Republican candidate Sass, who is now the winner on his way to the Senate, and we'll get him later. Domina, the Democrat, two other candidates, and Dan Buhrdorf. The 2 points, of course, tax Wall Street, the 1% Wall Street sales tax, and the question of nationalizing the Federal Reserve, the $5 trillion credit, and the 30 million new jobs. So all of that came out, and that got into an AP wire that went around the world, and indeed the apparently the Omaha World Herald even had it. Now, this was not possible to get sufficient signatures because of the archaic technicalities to be on the ballot, but there was also a registered write-in campaign, which unfortunately fell short of the threshold of reporting the number of votes. But in this case, most emphatically, the number of votes is largely irrelevant. This is a statewide campaign against a very well-funded Ben Sass, reactionary Republican, with Freemasonic and religious extremist networks that we'll be talking about here over the coming weeks. Take a look at, for example, the recent article here by Wayne Madsen about the GOP, where he has a new reading of the P. We'll talk about that too later. So that is the Dan Buhrdorf campaign, and again, we'll be drawing the results of this during the hot stove season, right? Well, what does this show about how do you organize insurgent political campaigns here as time goes on? And secondly, James Hinton in California 5, the 5th Congressional District of California. James Hinton is coming in with about 25% of the votes so far. There may be some pockets of uncollected votes. Hard to say about that. But look at this. James Hinton spent about $500, is my best estimate, and he got 30,000 votes. This means, of course, that he got about 60 votes per dollar, 60 votes per dollar. In the case of other candidates, I'm thinking of Bloomberg, and I should have the statistic in my head, but I don't. When Bloomberg ran for re-election as mayor of New York, he was spending upwards of $100 per vote. So in the case of Bloomberg, it's dollars per vote. In the case of Hinton, it's votes per dollar, 30, compared to something like $100 or $150 per vote for Bloomberg. And the other interesting comparison here is the Cindy Sheehan for Congress campaign of 2008. And there we see that Cindy Sheehan, with all that publicity from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream Foundation, all that television exposure, she was the anti-Bush pasionaria of 2004 and related times, with all the anti-war and anti-Republican ferment. She got 16% in 2008. That's 46,000 votes. I don't know how much money she had. Sure as hell more than the $500 that James Hinton had. So those two benchmarks, right? The programmatic and the authority of the candidacy of Dan Buhrdorf and this tremendous achievement of Hinton of matching an entrenched, well-funded henchman of the Pelosi machine. This shows that something can be done. Many people now after this election would say, well, I'm in the slough of despond. Far too many were in the slough of despond already before the election, as Charlie Cook of the Cook Political Report has gloated. Yeah, and well, he might. CBS News, The Washington Post, the Cook Political Report, Jon Stewart, all of them spreading what Cook calls despondency, despair. It's a sophisticated kind of legal voter suppression. You make the group, the target group, believe that voting is futile. There is no point. There is no point. So you might as well stay home. And that is what many Democratic voters did. As Obama reminded these Republicans, right? Last time the turnout was closer to 2/3, but this time it's close to 1/3 because the key group stayed home. The black vote was 30%. It could have been 5 or 7 points more, and maybe we would have had some different results. So thanks to Jon Stewart and Russell Brand and the rest of these clowns, they said, no, don't worry, don't vote. It's not worth it. Well, now you're going to feel, unfortunately, through the pain in your own flesh, what it's going to be. And again, we'll hear from Dan Buhrdorf and James Hinton later on in the program. But now let's look at the unfortunate panorama of the of who did win. You remember all of our points of analysis. Remember, our perspective here is the Republican Party should be destroyed. After that, the Democratic Party should be split between a Wall Street branch, the majority, at least, of elected officials, and then the minority, the New Deal populist pro-labor group. We know that the oligarchy controls the president during the first term by the need for money to run for a second term. But in the second term, the president is controlled by scandals and negative publicity. So we know all that. And we know that there's been a huge media narrative that Obama's unpopular, therefore the Democrats are going to lose, and therefore you should stay home and not waste your time on this, right? And that is, of course, absolutely crazy. So the result of all this now is obviously a bad result. Now, Obama has himself to blame. Obama did not have a job program. You don't have a job creation program. That, of course, means that you're in a depression, you've got economic stagnation, you have nothing to say about it. Official position of the Obama White House was, the recession is over, we don't need to do anything more about it. Let's get on with the war on women, let's get on with other issues, and although some of these issues have merit, this was not enough. So that kind of complacency was fatal. Obama, I must say, Obama shows a little bit more fight after the election than at the outset of the election. But, of course, remember, there was no Democratic war room. There was no Democratic attack. There was nothing about McCain meeting with the cannibal, the caliph, and the kidnapper, consorting with ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists. There was nothing about McCain's promise that he would press as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, that he would press to start two wars, a ground war with Iraq and a ground war in Syria. None of that was picked up. There was the Mitch McConnell tape. That was picked up by Grimes. And we'll say a nice thing about Grimes in a minute on World Crisis Radio. World Crisis Radio in our post-election show. I would like to just remind the control room, we do have that recording number. If the control room could be so kind as to connect us to the recording number, we then have that backup, if that's okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So now let's continue. There was then, of course, the infamous Mitch McConnell tape promising David Koch that if the Republicans took power, there would be no increase in the minimum wage, no extension of unemployment benefits, and no relief for students who are crushed by $1.3 trillion of high-interest student debt. The only person who used that I could see was Grimes. Allison Grimes, much maligned, seemed to me a certain amount of fight, and certainly a campaign that was more radical than most Democratic campaigns, because it had to be. She had to attack McConnell, therefore she had to attack Koch, she had to attack something substantive. The Democrats had no job program, they had a few floating things, but at the same time, remember that Obama backed off on the minimum wage campaign. In midsummer or early summer, Obama backed off on the minimum wage campaign, saying it's too divisive. Why don't you people go forward in the various states and do that, which then, of course, did happen. At the same time, the Republicans ran on nothing. They had pure demagogy, no program. What are your intentions? We won't tell you. We hate Obama. We're not Obama. That's the Republican campaign. And that, of course, is a piece of pernicious nonsense. The media, in a sweetheart symbiosis with those Republicans, essentially said, we'll let you off. We won't ask you what you're going to do. And now they pull it up out of their nose. So we have all of this having happened. Now, the situation, of course, is quite grim. However, we look at Obama in his post-election speech, and then today, the lunchtime meeting with the various congressional leaders. His line is, I think accurately, you guys ran on nothing. Now tell me what you want. We'll let the pundits figure this out. I heard the 1/3 who voted. I also heard the 2/3 who didn't vote. So Dana Milbank of Skull and Bones says essentially that he's not suitably contrite. The others, Krauthammer says it's a policy of petulance and denial. I urge Obama to hang tough. I would say to Obama, go big, go long, do something for those Hispanics, right? You can't expect to get Hispanic votes if you don't do something for them. How about those students? You didn't do a damn thing for the students. Obama, you could have said, I think Elizabeth Warren was right, not this year, but last year. The old Elizabeth Warren is interesting right now from last year. The 0.75% paid for by the Federal Reserve. Now you're talking something halfway serious. 3.5% paid through the Treasury. A bad joke. So I would say to Obama, I would urge you, hang tough. Do something big and spectacular for the Hispanics. And then, as Mitch McConnell said, you're going to have a red flag. You're showing a red flag to the Republican bull. Yes. Or, as Boehner says, if you play with matches, you will burn your fingers. Take that threat and put it you know where. And, of course, poisoning the well. That's the other one. Look, the hypocrisy of the Republicans, and indeed of many voters, is amazing. They say, we don't like acrimony, we don't like gridlock, we don't like attack ads, and then they reward the party of national sabotage, gridlock, and attack ads. Now, we're told that the Republican leaders were so careful, they didn't let any wackos come through. You remember the chuckleheads, the wacko birds, the fanatics, the sociopaths, the obsessed individuals. Well, let's see, who do we have? Cory Gardner in Colorado. This is a personhood freak, carefully chosen. The difference between the chuckleheads, the wacko birds on the one hand, and the mainstream Republicans, purely cosmetic, purely a matter of self-marketing, right? Hide your lunatic opinions. Don't get too far out in front. Be a sort of a controlled reactionary, right? Don't let it all hang out. So Cory Gardner, this was a place where the Tea Party failed veteran Buck was going to take over that Senate race. The Republicans got him out. They gave him a seat in the Congress. And now Cory Gardner, a Tea Party personhood freak extremist, gets the seat. In North Carolina, Tom Tillis, part of the hated local government machine, right, in the South Carolina legislature. This guy is a party to savage cuts of education, which, given the North Carolina future built on Research Triangle and related things, that's a death sentence for the future of the state. He gets the seat. James Lankford, another specimen. This guy looks like death warmed over. From Oklahoma, he takes the seat vacated by the Corbett or whatever his name was, retiring. He's already forgotten. Shelley Moore Capito. Shelley Moore Capito, as the Moore suggests, she's a legacy. She's a silver spoon oligarch. She's there because her father was the governor of the state. Steve Daines in Montana, another extremist, I believe. He's on the personhood agenda. David Perdue in Georgia, the voice of the raging petty bourgeois id. Mark Levin says David Perdue is a true conservative. Mike Rounds in South Dakota. My God, where do they get these people? And then we have the top three, actually, on this rogues gallery of new Republican senators. Joni Ernst. Now here, the question for the United States, for these Republicans, where is the boundary between being a reactionary and being a fascist? And I would say you become a fascist when you advocate the use of armed force, illegal armed force, to get to your goals, right? In other words, the Squadrace of Mussolini and the Sturmabteilung of Hitler. These are people who go into violent terroristic actions outside of the law to smash their opponents and get through. Now, with Joni Ernst, we have, of course, the hog castrator, the cultural populist. We've been through this, right? The cultural populism has been done to death. So she was for impeachment already back in the middle of the summer. She is somebody who says that she's got a 9mm pistol and that she's going to use that pistol on government officials who come by and who don't respect her rights. So with that, I'm afraid, as soon as you bring out the 9mm pistol, you've crossed the line from being a reactionary to being a fascist. Back in a minute. I now have the statistic. Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg of New York, competing for a third term in November 2009, spent $102 million of his own money, $183 per vote, $183 per vote. James Hinton is approximately 60 votes per dollar. So if you're looking where to invest your money, and I'll wrap this up in just a second on these candidates. So Joni Ernst, I think we've agreed, has, according to at least one powerful argument, crossed the line from being a reactionary to being a fascist with her 9mm pistol. That applies to, you can apply that retroactively. And then we have the dynamic duo, Ben Sasse and Tom Cotton. Ben Sasse in Nebraska, Tom Cotton in Arkansas. And what do we have here? These are two of a kind. You'll remember that we had in previous years Barack Obama and Deval Patrick, one the principal candidate, one the spare. And I think this example has attracted enough attention so that a certain Freemasonic reactionary network has decided to field these two. They were featured in a New York Times article a while ago. Similar profiles, elite education, Ivy League, international credentials, but at the same time, good old boys. Now, with Ben Sasse, he, of course, a reactionary, thinks the Pope is the Antichrist. The principal thing with him, though, is the slogan, 93, 93, 93. That was his 93 days, 93 counties, 93 new ideas. However, unfortunately, this is the signature of Aleister Crowley of the Order of the Golden Dawn and British intelligence and the British Occult Bureau, a British spook. However, Ben Sass represents a very, very, very dubious network. And remember, the problem with Ben Sass is when Pagegate was going on, when Congressman Foley and Congressman Kolba were molesting the pages, who were minors, there was a proctor there, a tutor and supervisor of these pages, and that was Ben Sass. And later on, when he went to take over a small university there in Nebraska, there was a huge scandal in the athletic department about prostitution and sexual exploitation. So that's Ben Sass. Tom Cotton, of course, another reactionary. I guess the thing with him is that he voted against the Pandemic Preparedness Act. We'll be fleshing out these portraits as time goes on. But Ben Sass, quite possibly, as he's been telling people for years, a candidate for the presidency, 45th president. That doesn't give him much time. Tom Cotton, the spare, I think, although maybe it's the other way around, from Arkansas. Now, you look at these people. Here's where we get down to the nitty-gritty. Look at this collection of imbeciles, right? Look at a bunch of cretins. Look at a bunch of scoundrels. Look at one is dumb and corrupt. The other one is cruel and stupid. You can do better. You, I mean you, listening to this. You can do better. You are a moral and intellectual giant, and even a political giant when it comes to campaigning skills, compared to this collection of jackasses. It is unbelievable. This is what and these people, I can imagine a news broadcast in Weimar, Germany, in like 1932, and you'd hear the commentators say, well, there are some people who think that Hitler is actually the most moderate solution. Such commentators might say, why, when you compare him to Röhm and the Strasser brothers, he seems to be much more moderate, these commentators may say, right? So you get the idea. The news media are covering up the fact, they even say, oh, those really crazy ones, the Sharon Angles, the witch, the Todd Aiken and Murdoch the Morlock in Indiana. Oh, those were crazy people. But now we've got, much more solid candidates. These are chuckleheads and much, much worse. So the only thing I can say to people is run for office. That means you. And if you can't do it yourself, support the movement that we have, the Tax Wall Street Party, the United Front Against Austerity. Our program works. Our program gets mass traction. You can go farther with that program than any other program. And it has the wonderful benefit of allowing the survival of civilization as compared to the other ones. Now, what's going to happen? Well, the Democrats are shifting left. The blue dogs are extinct. Within a couple of weeks, we're going to have a budget by December 11th. Will that include the Export-Import Bank? There are all kinds of other things that are on the chopping block. Will Obama go big for the Hispanics? I urge him to go very, very big. Get that group on your side. Bind them to your soul with hoops of steel. Do them a historic service and a service to the United States, because we need to have a labor force. They are an indispensable ingredient in the United States' ability to compete with powerful rivals like China, like the European Union, Japan, and all the rest, right? We need them. This is just a matter of overweening national interest. And if the Republicans go for impeachment, then bring it on. Bring it on. That would even get the Hispanics more mobilized. Now, the Republican ideas, as Obama said, you ran on nothing, so now tell us what you think you want. And they say, well, the lesson of this election is there are $2 trillion of cash overseas, and we could bring it home if we give them a cash holiday. I'd say pass something that starts a 20 or 30% tax on the corporations that have that overseas if they don't bring it home. In other words, something punitive, something aversive. Don't reward them. By the way, little Rand Paul is big on bringing home the $2 trillion. And then they want more free trade, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. No way. the giant sucking sound, we've had it. Union busting. Oh, my God. The Time magazine cover story, you'll remember, is whether a group of millionaires from Silicon Valley can bust the teachers' union and throw out the rotten apples. And this is, of course, Michelle Rhee, but there's a character here called David Welsh, and he wants to bust the teachers' union. The Wall Street Journal today has an article where they're hoping that the results of this election mark the political collapse of the teachers' unions, and they want to play up the fact that Marshall Tuck, some kind of a Democratic sub, was defeated. Good. He deserved to be defeated. Down with Tuck. And this woman in Rhode Island, right, the new Democratic governor who got there by cutting the pension funds, this is a dangerous tendency. Don't get sucked into a Democratic Party with a strong anti-union, union-busting, hostile to labor. That is suicide, you Democrats. This is a new dimension for the degradation of the Democratic Party. Nominations. Hey, might be good to have a Surgeon General, huh? How about getting that through? Concerning war and peace, we mentioned McCain. Notice also the leprechaun, little Ron Paul, coming out of the cerements of his forgotten existence and saying, after the polls had closed, little Ron, the leprechaun, said, by the way, if the Republicans take the Senate, that increases the possibility for war. Thank you, Ron, after the vote, after the polls had closed. That's just what we needed. Couldn't you have said that a little bit earlier? This guy's acting in bad faith. He's covering his derriere. There are also, however, fortunately, bad omens for Hillary. Bad omens for Elizabeth Warren, too. This was not the year of the woman. This was the year of the unwoman. And look at them all that went down, right? Michelle Nunn, Grimes, unfortunately, the woman running against Scott Walker, the right-wing female Wall Street Democrat. Hillary. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now keep up with everything at tarpley.net, tarpley.net. If you haven't looked lately, there's a massive material on the elections. And I'm afraid for the control room that the echo is back. So, yes, a lot of right-wing Wall Street Democratic women went down to defeat. It's not a good brand, so maybe that will play some role in the selection process. Now, remember the good things. The minimum wage. This is New Deal America. The minimum wage passed in Alaska, in Arkansas, in South Dakota, in Nevada. It passed in San Francisco by 30, I think it's even 40, 50 points. It was an immense victory. This is New Deal America, people. Make no mistake. The most odious of all governors, with lacking the political skills and the national support. Corbett in Pennsylvania went down to defeat. And then Scott Brown, right, the candidate in New Hampshire, his campaign song, Just a Gigolo by Louis Armstrong, or his campaign manual, The Carpetbaggers by Harold Robbins, but defeated. And this is important because he ran as a populist, but after all, he worked for the State Street Bank. He wrecked any attempt to try to regulate Wall Street in any sense at all. Down he goes. And then we've got that guy, Southland, or whatever his name is, that is actually a Florida congressman, the biggest enemy of food stamps, the guy who wanted to make food stamps contingent on a job, when the whole point is you get food stamps when you can't find a job. He also went down to defeat. Lee Terry, the racist Republican in Nebraska, also defeated. So remember that the minimum wage is important because it lifts the entire wage structure. It is not accurate to say that if you're making 20 or 25 an hour, the minimum wage does not interest you. It does. It's going to lift, is going to be an updraft for all wage categories. That is how this happened. And of course, the minimum wage, essential piece of the New Deal, Social Security Act of 1935, unemployment insurance run by the states. So there we go. It is New Deal America. And the program adequate to reflect that is the Tax Wall Street Party. Seize the Fed, $5 trillion for infrastructure, 30 million new productive jobs, 5 million summer jobs for disadvantaged youth, and the Wall Street sales tax, 1%. With that, we can refinance your student loans to zero. We can stop foreclosures on your house, and we can provide free college education through community college and state institutions. And we should. And again, Democrats, don't be surprised if the students are not enthusiastic. You didn't do a damn thing for them. So, the warning to Obama, no free trade, no tax bonanza for the $2 trillion hoarded abroad. And it is interesting now to see the response of Obama. The post-election press conference, once again, more fight from Obama, although in an understated way, than we've seen perhaps in a long time. Now, you normally calculate Obama will cave in. Remember what the threat is. Bill Clinton in 1999 and 00, those were the worst crimes. In 1999, it was the abolition of Glass-Steagall, the permission for interstate banking, monstrous increase in speculation, and in 00, it was even worse. It was the legalization and deregulation of all derivatives. Those were the worst things. And from 00 to 08 is a direct straight line to the crash into the abyss. So those interesting points. Little note on the role of Rand Paul. If you remember the old Miss America ceremony from Atlantic City, and you'd have Bert Parks come out there and he'd start singing, "Here she is, Miss America," and then Miss America would come out. Rand Paul was playing Bert Parks for Mitch McConnell of the Mitch and Koch show. There he was singing for him. And remember, Little Rand says the Republican brand sucks. Yeah, Little Rand, but you were out there campaigning for every one of those suckers. There was nobody so degraded, so reactionary, so sociopathic, so crazy that you wouldn't go out there and give a speech for them, Rand. So we observed all of that. Forget the common ground, if anything. Stop prating about cooperation. This is not going to happen. If it does, it's going to be bad. We want confrontation. We want gridlock. Gridlock is our only hope. Things are quite grim in many ways. But again, we may have the pessimism of the intelligence, but we have the optimism of the will. And as McCain reminds us, two choices: get active or get radioactive. Now, there are some interesting things going on. Obama writes a letter to the Ayatollah, right? Not even to Rouhani, not to the reformist president, but to Ayatollah Khamenei. So there we go. And it's, let's work together against ISIS and let's solve our nuclear problem along the way. A lot of people in Saudi are freaking. A lot of people around Netanyahu are freaking. But I think this is a little bit promising for the United States. Now, the other thing is Syria. Something has happened in Syria. The headline of one of the headlines of the Washington Post today, Friday, November 7th, Syrian rebels reject report on airstrikes. And here it is. There's an area of northwest Syria which is extremely sensitive because it is a border crossing. It's one of the border crossings from Turkey that's closest to Aleppo. It's a strategic point on the map. And we're talking about Bab el Hawa. Bab meaning gate, as I learned. Hawa, H-A-W-A, that's the crossing. The town is called Sarmada, the road to Aleppo. There's another one called the Bab Salamen Crossing. Read all this in the Washington Post. Article by Karen DeYoung, Liz Sly, try that, Liz S-L-Y, and Missy Ryan. So the idea is the U.S. has bombed the allies of the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, and that is to say parts of Nusra. The U.S. has bombed the Khorasan group and parts of Jabhat al-Nusra. And not only that, they have bombed the Arar al-Sham, A-H-R-A-R, Sham, of course, Syria. And this has caused a furor. So the U.S. is bombing people that are al-Qaeda, but allied with the FSA, and we're supposed to respect those alliances? I'm so sorry. And here we have a think tanker, Charles Lister, who monitors Syria for the Brookings Doha Center in Qatar, or Qatar, indicated that the Thursday strikes may have far-reaching effects for the long-term U.S. strategy of strengthening the moderate fighters. The U.S. may now have lost Syria, said Lister on Twitter. The U.S. may have lost Syria. Why? Because the FSA insists on allying with al-Qaeda against ISIS? Well, good riddance to that Syria, right? The real Syria, the real moderates are all in the parliament there, right? The moderate opposition is sitting in the parliament in Damascus, where they exercise the role of a parliamentary opposition, and their rights are thoroughly guaranteed. Therefore, we have to look at increasing acrimony with the Saudi Arabian royal family, and somehow the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Harem al-Sharif, the question of the rebuilding of the temple, the tremendous tensions with Netanyahu somehow fit into this. Is Obama attempting a rapprochement with Iran? Now, that would be a legacy. You want to go for your legacy, do something like Nixon and China, Obama and Iran. Back in a minute. Welcome back to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. It's our second hour here in Washington, D.C. on the afternoon of Friday, the 7th of November. Now, we have got to go immediately to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and our good friend and one of the most admirable fighters for the American people that we know of, and that's Reverend Edward Pinkney. We missed him last week, but there was a good reason, unfortunately. The judicial frame-up and persecution of Reverend Pinkney has gone forward. But without further ado, let's go there and ask Reverend Pinkney, what's the latest monstrous miscarriage of justice coming out of those courts, Reverend?
Webster, I want to tell you I am excited to be on your show, but unfortunately, an all-white jury with absolutely no evidence, the forensics told them, the handwriting expert, that it could not have been me, and this jury still found me guilty with no evidence. Every witness that they brought in told them that they signed their own date on this petition. And then we had three witnesses say that they witnessed somebody else changing dates. And they still, this all-white jury that was motivated by something other than the truth, found me guilty. It was a political move. It was about a political as anything could ever get. It's shameful. It's disgraceful. And it's really something that we have to get into. I tell you that this is something I don't even know what to tell you. I'm so disturbed about it that, but I can't be. I should have known who it was, or what was going on. I should have known that. You see, but we were so sure that we won every single day. We had a great day. We had a tremendous day. We did. Yes.
Exactly,
so
Reverend.
Webster, I just want to say that I just can't believe it. I was in total shock because I was sure that they was going to come back with not guilty because there was no evidence. I mean, when I say no, I mean absolutely that. Not one piece of evidence that said Reverend Pinkney did anything, yet they came back, 12 white folks, with a verdict of guilty on me.
A kangaroo court, a runaway jury, a jury suborned.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm just so outdone. But I'm working. We also discovered that the felony charges should have been misdemeanor charges because there's no such charge as a felony for changing a date on a recall petition. But my attorney right now, I guess I didn't have all the money for him. He don't want to file no motions now in reference to it.
Well, we want to put, from this time and place, we want to put out a call, right, that pro bono lawyers who are interested in defending human rights, voting rights, constitutional rights in the United States had better contact Reverend Pinkney. This is the time for civil libertarians, the real ones, to come forward. And again, it's probably going to have to be pro bono. But let me also say, I can certainly strongly recommend, and I think it will be approved, that the United Front Against Austerity and the Tax Wall Street Party will do everything possible to have an international campaign, and I stress international, in favor of Reverend Pinkney, because this is a monstrous event, right? This is a miscarriage of justice. This is a perversion of the court system. This is persecution under color of law.
And you are absolutely correct, because it made the front page for 2 weeks. They had a nice big picture of me on there, knowing that they didn't have any evidence, knowing that they didn't have a single thing that say that I did anything. Not nothing. I mean, absolutely. And the prosecutor told the jury, you can convict him with no evidence, and was shaking their head, go up and down, so they could say, and then you could see them doing the same thing. We sure can convict him with no evidence. It was criminal, and but I'm not mad because I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back, and what I want to do more than anything else, if I can get some funds to just hire me a lawyer. I mean, it's going to take a little money, and I know we've been out there, and I appreciate everybody who sent money for the handwriting expert. That and they told them it couldn't have been me, and they still. How could you find somebody guilty if they say it's not him? And
okay, Reverend.
No eyewitness to it or anything.
We've got to.
I'm out here, and I'm battling, and I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. I'm supposed to be sentenced on December the 15th, and I do have a plan, and I'm gonna work hard to make this thing a reality, so I can be on your show following that Friday. I think it's December the 20th. I'm gonna make sure that I don't have to end up going to jail or anything like that. I'm gonna make sure I do the things that need to be done and continue this fight, because it's all about the people. It's not about Reverend Pinkney. It's about the people.
The handwriting expert is now in the court record of the original jurisdiction, right? That record is going to be valuable because it proves that you didn't do it.
Right.
But then it's go to appeal. But we've got to get to appeal. Reverend, quickly, you got to tell us how people can help, where they can send money, how they can get in touch. In particular, pro bono lawyers, right? Pro bono lawyers, please come forward. Civil rights people.
Absolutely, and I want you can go to bhbanco.org. That's bhbanco.org. I got a PayPal right there, or you can mail a check to Banco, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. That's Banco, BANCO, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. But go to the website and donate now. And don't wait for somebody else to donate, because I'll never get, then it won't happen. You have to do it. Take this initiative and send some money. Go to bhbanco.org, and there's a PayPal right there. I need the money. I got to save myself. I don't want to be locked up for the rest of my life, and I want to do the right thing.
And I would appeal especially to people who listen to this program in countries outside the United States. And I know that there's a very strong group, right? This is the kind of thing that you will not get on, so many news sources, right? Certainly not the mainstream ones and not even the supposed opposition or left liberal ones. This is a cause that has to be spread. I guess, Reverend, if we needed to have a press release, the story of what happened, is that written up somewhere so we could start distributing it?
You can go to my website, bhbanco.org.
Uh-huh. Okay.
bhbanco.org is on my website. It's got a lot of information. I got a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff on the internet. I tell you, there was a white couple that was at the trial, and when they said that I was guilty, they started crying like babies in there. Matter of fact, they was crying and I wasn't, which was very unusual. A white couple stood up there and saw, because they was there all week, and they saw what happened, and they said, wow, this is the worst thing I ever seen in my life. And this lady, she just cried and cried, and she was, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I know, but, I've been, this is war, This is right. War, but we got to fight back. We need finances. If you could send some money to bhbanco.org on the PayPal, I tell you, I'm going to win this battle. That's a promise and not a say-so.
We'll do whatever we can to help. And again, an international campaign to focus world attention on this kind of a situation. And unfortunately, this is the Snyder system. Because all of this, again, it's an attempt to maintain the authority of an emergency manager, whatever he calls himself. That's what he is, right? Mayor Hightower from Whirlpool and Wall Street in Benton Harbor, so they can loot the city and steal the park and steal everything else for their rich cronies, right? Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Now, we told you at the beginning that the Dan Buhrdorf for Senate campaign in Nebraska stands as a model for this kind of an effort on a statewide basis. The program, to be sure, but also the candidate, somehow a model of the public defense of these ideas. So once again, we'll be writing up analysis of what happened. But the main thing is Dan Buhrdorf, I think, has established himself as a political figure in Nebraska and beyond, state and national leader in this great cause. So what we need to say to Dan is congratulations and welcome. If Dan is there.
I really appreciate it. Yes, can you hear me, Webster?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I said thank you very much for that very kind and generous
you deserve every word. I wish I had more time. I could say more.
Thank you, sir. Well, you'll please excuse me if I sound a little bit out of sorts. We just had a medical emergency here with a family member, but I just wanted to thank everyone who helped me on my campaign. I want you to know that I know a lot of your listeners are big supporters, and I want you to know that I'm going to continue to fight for the social safety net and the economic rights of Americans and fight against people dying in America from austerity cuts, as well as people dying needlessly in unnecessary wars around the country. And and my whole campaign staff, I'm sure, will continue to support the principles and programs expressed in my campaign, and we're all committed to that. And I'm also committed to study and improve myself to better articulate those ideas. And I think that'll be a lot of work ahead for me, and I'm looking forward to do that. I'll begin looking for the institutional support and to make the progress and with the program and hit it wherever we can to hit it. And I also want to, before I get going too far, I want to congratulate Mr. James Hinton in California, District 5. Just a phenomenal performance, and he did a lot with. He had his own personal, health issues that I think you went over many times, mentioned on your program, and he just did phenomenally there, and we're very excited and proud of him. But in Nebraska, we think that this is a winning program, and we've worked hard to promote it, and we've found that it stands up against the ideas and issues that the other candidates that we had these ideas with quotation marks and issues, because that's what these candidates were calling their...
You mean 93, 93, 93?
Yeah, I heard about that. That's really...
what did he get? People are mystified.
I don't know what...
Is it 93 days, 93 counties, 93 ideas?
Of Nebraska.
Did he really have 93 ideas?
But I don't know. 93 ideas. I'm not sure. We didn't count them. I'm not sure if some of his campaign staff could count that high, to be frank. But we had. But let me be sure to tell you that that in Nebraska we don't usually associate with those numbers. From what I saw on social media, that is it's a bit over the top. But yeah, we've made a lot of contacts, and we've made a huge impact with this campaign, and we documented the direct influence we've had on the Democratic candidate, in particular, Mr. Domina, and the overall populist tone of this campaign in general. And we've hit them with economic populism and other candidates that we looked at, and I think all around the country we saw it. Other candidates offer weaker flavors of populist talk. So it's here in Nebraska that our campaign got the only exposure of our full program, including the Wall Street sales tax and the nationalization of the Federal Reserve for infrastructure development, in any major debate for national office in this general election. So
that's right.
We've got our plan of a Wall Street sales tax and the mobilization of the Federal Reserve nationwide in AP coverage. But we got our platform out in major state newspapers here in Nebraska. We got TV. We got on TV in Nebraska. We got mention over the radio, broadcasting into 5 states, and then we bought our ads at the end. We were able to buy.
Yes, tell us about the ads, because this got a little bit lost in the rush at the end.
Well, yeah, sure. We had the opportunity to buy some ads, and we had them on. And actually, I misspoke last week. I think I reported that we were paying as high as $45. I have to apologize. I just it was just too frantic, and I misspoke. We had ads that ran between $10 and $20. I thought it was pretty fair considering our rush on it, and that was the candidate fee in Nebraska, pretty standard for everybody depending on your time slot. And so I think that fee is set by law, if I'm not mistaken. And then we had it on three stations, and one of the stations we were lucky enough to get on was a recently had been reprogrammed station, so it actually the ratings are probably a lot higher than what we were charged. So that was really great. That was on 101.9 KOOO, and then we had some other stations that they mostly targeted the demographic of what do we say? 20s to 30s or 30s to 40s, something like this. And most of the targeted audiences were women voters. I think it was a very good use of money. That was what we got for our recommendations with the media people that helped us with the buy. So it was really great. I think it went really well. And there's a lot of people that I want to thank, Webster. You in particular, thank you for helping me and supporting me with appearances on your show. It is very, very wonderful, a great experience for me.
Don't mention it, because that is the whole purpose of this broadcast. Right?
Okay,
to stimulate exactly that.
Great.
So thank you.
A lot of people supported my campaign. If you would like to talk to me, reach out to me. You can contact me at Friends of Dan Buhrdorf, P.O. Box 6584, Lincoln, Nebraska 68506, or at danfornebraska.com. Or actually, I should say danfornebraska@gmail.com. Actually, that's how you get to me. And then a special thanks to Joe Johnson, who stood with me from the beginning to the end and was there fighting for our program all the way, just like he has been since October 2012, when both he and I began organizing around these ideas that I ended up campaigning on. Webster, I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the fun stuff that happened here in Nebraska. During one thing, for example, is during our campaign we addressed the Mitch McConnell leak tapes. I think you've been talking about this more than anyone. We addressed this directly to the Democratic leadership here in Nebraska on social media, and social media proved for us to be a very useful tool to direct attention to the campaign and direct attention in the campaign, and we had a very strong presence there. And we asked the Democratic leadership, why weren't we hearing from the party on the Mitch McConnell pledge to cut student aid, fight against the minimum wage, and ramp up the killer austerity cuts? And he replied that if we want to stop the Republican takeover, then my campaign and like-minded groups should support Dave Domina. And we replied, well, if we want to stop the GOP, then Dave Domina should stop.
10 seconds,
should support Dave Domina, because there are persistent rumors, even in public over the radio, and personally I heard this.
Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It's Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. We now want to go further on to the wine country of California, Napa, Sonoma, and those parts, and talk to the other leading candidate, I guess, of the Tax Wall Street movement, and that, of course, is James Hinton, who was running against the entrenched ally of Pelosi, Mike Thompson, right? And the slogan was, Mike, take a hike. Unfortunately, Mike Thompson had overwhelming numbers and resources, but James Hinton still got, as I went through at the beginning of the show, maybe we're going to repeat this, but about 30,000 votes with about $500, maybe $1,000 at most. And the difference is between Michael Bloomberg in New York City in 2009 to get his third term. Bloomberg had to spend $183 per vote, and Hinton in the fifth California 5 was spending. He was not getting dollars per. Not dollars per vote, but votes per dollar. It's about 60 votes per dollar at the 500 figure, and then corresponding a little bit less if it goes up. So, James, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you, Webster. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, so far the early returns are unfavorable for us, with about 100 and little under 120,000 votes are cast, and I got 24.5% to Mike Thompson's 75%. But we did a massive improvement since the primary. You know, in the primary, I cashed in with 11% of the vote. Thompson had over 80%, and then Doug Van Ram had roughly 8%. So since then, my campaign assumed all of the Van Ram votes instead of splitting the Van Ram votes. I assumed all of them, and as poker players say, I carved into Mike Thompson's stack by taking some of his voters away. So I was able to move some of his voters onto my platform along with the Van Ram plan. So moving forward, you know, I'd say we got the car pointed in the right direction. Now we just need to hit the gas.
Excellent.
Webster?
Yeah, absolutely. Keep going. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, I think it's important for people out here who want to look at California and the power of the New Deal. You could say Mike Thompson is very closely comparable to Nancy Pelosi, right? Mike Thompson and Nancy Pelosi, they run on the same slogan, when women succeed, America succeeds. Yeah, well, when Wall Street wins, women lose. That's the problem. Okay, our platform champions for everyone, including women, in so many other ways. So moving forward, that might be the next slogan. When Wall Street wins, women lose. And we're going to show the difference of the two parties out here moving forward a little bit more. But you look at Nancy Pelosi. She ran against John Dennis from the Republican Party. This guy ran a campaign of a little over, last time I looked on the FEC the other day, it was over $500,000, right? And over $500,000 spent. My campaign, I raised about $1,000 total. And, you know, I spent a little bit more than that for my out-of-pocket. Just, you know, a couple thousand out-of-pocket on top of that. But this guy got 17.4% of the vote to our 20. We received 7% more vote against Thompson, running on the New Deal with no money virtually behind us. no build up, no legacy, no League of Tax Wall Street, Women of Tax Wall Street Party caucuses out here working for us like the Republicans had. So they came out.
The League of Women Voters, right? The League of Women Voters.
Well, even that, like you have the Republican women of the Sonoma Valley. There is no tax Wall Street women of the Sonoma Valley out here going around collecting signatures, passing out flyers, going door to door for me, campaigning. Not yet, at least. I mean, hopefully we'll have that soon. We'll get the United Front Against Austerity, Sonoma chapters, Napa chapter, Bay Area chapters. We'll get this going because, like I said, we did very well compared to the Republican campaign. The Republicans ran a much money-backed campaign against the same candidate, Nancy Pelosi, and had far worse results. So it shows you that our platform versus the Republican platform, no matter how much money you put behind it, is still unfavorable to the Tax Wall Street Party. And this is a brand new idea. First time out to show much better than the Republicans like this. And it's not like the Republicans, didn't run a campaign out there. Like I said, they spent over $500,000 of somebody's money out there running that campaign. So they put a little bit into it. But this was, round one. Wall Street 1, Hinton 0. Good. I'm fine.
After one inning.
Yeah.
After one inning.
That's right. Let's play ball. Or as Ernie Banks would say, let's play two at least. Okay? It's a great day to play two. So the road to 2016 starts, and one way or another, should be Mike Thompson's final approach. This should be it for him. So we've started the groundwork that, your typical Republican parties won't do. And like I said, we've gotten good results here with nothing. And some of our latest articles that were in the Benicia paper came out wonderful, along with some great coverage out here by the Vallejo Times, the Lake County News, but really the Benicia Herald, the Sunday before the election. I know it was a little late, but they had a beautiful front page article with Thompson and his story on one side and me and my story on the other side, and I think they did a very good job of presenting. It's
an excellent summary. Now, James, what we're hoping for now is there are lots of groups, right? You say there are no, the Tax Wall Street women of the Valley there. This is exactly what we have to do. In other words, there are all kinds of chambers of commerce, professional associations, any number of things. What they're going to want you as a speaker, because you are now the opposition, right? You're the opposition to Take a Hike Mike, Corkhead, whatever we want to call him, right? The guy who spends too long at the happy hour. He gets too happy during the happy hour, and his district is not happy enough. So that you're the loyal opposition. I guess we'd say.
The problem is his happy hour has led him to bad judgments as part of our intelligence committee. He is getting bluffed, and it's hurting us. It's hurting our national security when Corkhead can't see through the smoke and mirrors and can't understand with what's going on in the Middle East. There's plenty of evidence to support so much out there that would call for, John McCain and a little, at least let's talk about it. Let's get this subject going.
Subpoena him.
There. What's that? Yeah.
Subpoena McCain. If you're on the Intelligence Committee, you can subpoena McCain and say, we want to know what you're doing.
Mike Corkhead, are you listening to Webster right now? Tune in. Do this. Follow the orders, okay? Come on, let's get going. If you want to care about our district, you're worried about the security, if you're worried about ISIS, why don't you get John McCain, subpoena him. Like I said, get in there, show us the pictures, tell us what he means by you don't know him like we know him. Okay, elaborate on that, McCain. Come on, I want to beat ISIS. A lot of us want to beat ISIS. We're going to need to hear John
Time
McCain.
Is up, and we want to thank a very exuberant James Hinton, who has just waged an extremely successful uphill fight to put the Tax Wall Street movement on the agenda there in the wine country of California. James, we're going to get you back frequently and soon, okay?
We'd love to be back, Webster. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye-bye. Well, welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, we have just 10 minutes left in our last segment. We've got to go through a lot of stuff. One thing that I want to say, if you want to know what to do right now, well, there's elements of continuity. Hashtag arrest McCain for ISIS with the number 4 to save a couple of keystrokes. Arrest McCain for ISIS is absolutely a la page, right? It is just the thing we need right now. McCain will be taking over the Senate Armed Services Committee. Can you imagine? Somebody who met with a cannibal, a kidnapper, and a caliph, and he's going to be the main guy there. And we'll get to him in some of his networks in a minute. If you want to cut 2%, 1 to 2%, I would say, off the Republican vote total, here's something you can do that costs you absolutely nothing. It is this problem that all kinds of people, really everybody across the spectrum, refers to people like Joni Ernst or Ben Sass or Tom Cotton as conservatives. They are not conservatives. There is nothing traditional about them. They are right-wing radicals. They are extremists. The most efficient term, however, is that they are reactionaries. They are reactionaries. Right-wing radicals proposing to do something that has not been done in the United States. And you've heard my arguments, right? American tradition, high-wage economy. These people, low-wage economy, and doomed. They're reactionaries. Now, some of them, as I argued with Joni Ernst, have crossed the line into fascism. Once you get that pistol out and say, I'm going to use this 9mm on some federal official who doesn't respect my rights, you have crossed the line into what I would call fascism. And people who propose to use the police outside of the law or private violence with armed gangs, that's fascism. What else is it? You don't need other aspects of the fascist paraphernalia to get to that point. So, if we could convince the person perhaps in the media who's closest to this, who's most aware, I think, of this distinction, E.J. Dionne, D-I-O-N-N-E, Washington Post, sometimes even a spark of decency, I don't know, but I think this is a starting point. We need to start putting pressure on individual pundits to make this transition. Stop giving this gift of public relations. Conservative sounds bland, vaguely reassuring, good, tradition, yeah, sure. That is not what they are. They are reactionaries, and more than a few have crossed the line into fascism. We didn't have a chance to go through the governors. I guess we'll go through some of these governors next week, right? Corbett, of course, down with Corbett. That was a landmark event. Here in Maryland, we now have Larry Hogan. All right. The pattern for Republican governors is that they cut $1 billion from the school budget in the first year. That's what Republicans do in most states. State about the size of Maryland, middle-sized state, $1 billion is about right. So they cut $1 billion from the education budget to pay for tax cuts for their rich friends. And here's one that even the Washington Post has focused on. In terms of the Washington metropolitan subway system, the capital of your country, many of you, we need this thing called the Purple Line. So the Purple Line is the beginning of a circle line, the kind of thing you have in Moscow, just to get it clear. The Circle Line, and this is sort of one of the northern quadrants of the Washington system. It would go from essentially from the Potomac over towards the I-95 corridor. There already about $1 billion has been devoted to this. It's already essentially waiting. Will Hogan, the new reactionary governor of Maryland, say, I'm going to sabotage this? Now, the tea leaves don't look good. He had Chris Christie down here 4 times in Maryland. Now, Chris Christie's racket is this. He applies for the money under the tunnel under the Hudson River. He gets several $1 billion of federal money. Then he calls off the project. He keeps the money. He uses that money to run the government of New Jersey without raising taxes, so he doesn't have to offend his rich friends, and he can bask in the admiration of some uninformed people in Iowa about his track record. The other one, people are wondering about the Sandy relief, right? That Christie is now exposed. This guy stood up. The sit down, shut up moment. The sit down, shut up started with the idea that Christie has hoarded that money too, almost $1 billion, to run the state without tax cuts so that he can impress the Republicans in the primary elections. Okay? Don't let Hogan get away with that. We also had this problem here. The financier Delaney, a Wall Street Democrat, and Howe, was almost unseated by the Secret Service gutter snipe Bongino, darling of the reactionaries. Bongino ran for office on the idea that he had been in the Secret Service. This is not a credential for many of us. So there is where we are. Another one. Cushing's Battery. For those of us who love the Gettysburg battlefield, who regard this as obviously it's a landmark in modern human civilization. Government of the people, by the people, for the people is the American answer to the Civis Romanus Sum speech of Lord Palmerston some years earlier. So this had to be a victory at Gettysburg, and Lincoln put forward the of the people, by the people, for the people, and this was then taken up by Dr. Sun Yat-sen of China and went around the world from there. Now, one of the heroes of the battle is Cushing. He's a lieutenant. He's a junior officer, West Point graduate, and he's there with his battery at Bloody Angle. And the Confederates of Pickett and Armistead, you know the lines, right? 1,000 died where Kemper led. 1,000 fell where Garnett fled. Through blinding flame and strangling smoke, the remnants through the batteries broke and crossed the works with Armistead. But before they did, they were decimated by Cushing. And Cushing's line was, first of all, as the Confederates got closer, double canister, right? Double load of shot and shell. And then, when they got even closer, shell without fuse, so that the shell would explode almost immediately when it left the mouth of the cannon. And he died. He has now gotten the posthumous Congressional Medal of Honor. So I say hats off to Cushing and the Union dead, without whom modern civilization would hardly exist. Now, we just had Sheridan in the Valley in October, and we're now looking forward to the Franklin-Nashville campaign with Schofield, and above all through the Rock of Chickamauga, the Sledgehammer of Nashville, George Thomas of Virginia, a patriot, kept the tradition of patriotism alive in Virginia in the era of such unfortunate figures as Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and so forth. Now, we also have to report a crisis at the Abby Martin show. The problem here was that pesky broadcast where Manny Rapallo, the producer of the show, had been a former aide to Senator Blanche Lincoln of Arkansas. She was voted out before, but at that time he was also working side by side with Muaz Mustafa, the Free Syrian Army guy and lobbyist here, who organized Senator McCain's illegal trip to Idlib back in April of 2013. So went into Blanche Lincoln. You found Manny Rapallo with Muaz Mustafa. They bring on Evan Barrett, neocon warmonger. In the background, Elizabeth O'Baggy, now working for McCain. The Kagans, all kinds. Now, Manny Rapallo, the heat was too great. He is no longer the producer of the Abby Martin show, and that is progress. So we'll be watching for further developments. We'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio.